I want to read you the headline of a story of the New York Times. Effort to remove Marjorie Taylor Greene from ballot can proceed, judge says. The case that Ms. Greene unsuccessfully sought to have dismissed mirrors efforts against other Republicans centered on the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. This is a New York Times story. A federal judge cleared the way on Monday for a group of Georgia voters to move forward with legal efforts seeking to disqualify Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene from running. The disqualification effort is based on a constitutional provision adopted after the Civil War that barred members of the Confederacy from holding office. It mirrors several other cases involving Republican members of Congress whose roles leading up to and during the deadly riots have drawn intense criticism. The judge, Amy Totenberg, who was appointed to the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Georgia by President Barack Obama, denied Ms. Greene's request for a preliminary injunction and temporary restraining order in the high-profile legal feud. In the 73-page ruling, Judge Totenberg wrote that Ms. Greene had failed to meet the burden of persuasion in her request for injunctive relief, which she called an extraordinary and drastic remedy. James Bopp Jr., a lawyer for Ms. Greene, said on Monday night the ruling was flawed and minimized the adverse effects. I will tell you this, it actually is a deeply flawed opinion. The problem here is the 14th Amendment. And let me read you the 14th Amendment. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president or vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or any executive or judicial officer of the state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But the Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. There are several things here that we need to note. One, some of you, myself included, do not care for Marjorie Taylor Greene. There is an opponent to Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jennifer Strahan. I hope she wins the primary. But if you are celebrating this case, you are more an insurrectionist against the constitutional republic than Marjorie Taylor Greene is. If you believe this case is warranted in any way, shape, or form, you are more an affront to our democracy and our republic than you think Marjorie Taylor Greene is. And you may not like me saying that, but you are. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment has very clear legal basis and precedent, and it involves actual Confederate insurrectionists against the United States. It does not involve people who were in no way, shape, or form storming Congress or opening the doors, and she didn't do any of that. This has nothing to do with anything remotely like January 6th. In fact, you will note that the individuals who have been charged overwhelmingly, with the exception of, I think, one or two, have not even been charged with sedition, let alone insurrection. None of them were charged with insurrection. You should be horrified that a federal judge would block an existing member of Congress from being on the ballot based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And there's something else here. Yesterday, a federal judge in Florida ruled that the mask mandate was unconstitutional. The New York Times immediately pounced on the fact that this was a Trump-appointed judge who was only 35 years old. If you read the opinion is actually more substantive than Judge Totenberg's opinion. Judge Totenberg, you need to know, and this is the third point here, is the sister of Nina Totenberg. Nina Totenberg is the progressive reporter of National Public Radio who for decades has been a useful source of disinformation for the propagandistic left against the Supreme Court. Nina Totenberg is a ruthless progressive reporter for NPR who has no shame in lying or misinforming people about what goes on in the United States Supreme Court and misrepresenting, distorting, lying about the positions of conservatives. She is a willful partisan. Her sister, Amy Totenberg, clearly is not much better. Amy Totenberg has been the judge in the Northern District of Georgia that progressive groups try to get their cases in front of, Stacey Abrams included, because they know that Judge Amy Totenberg will be sympathetic to them because she is a progressive activist. The very same media that wanted to smear the judge in Florida for the mask mandate refused to note anything about Judge Amy Totenberg and her willful habit of providing progressive activists a path forward with cases and then steering those cases in such a way to drag them out so that they cannot appeal. This is, as if you think the case yesterday was partisan, this is more partisan. The larger issue here is you have progressive activists trying to use this provision of the Constitution to block Republican members of Congress in punishment for what they see as sympathies to those who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. There's no legal basis for this. The actual plain text reading of the Section 3 of the Constitution doesn't allow it. No person shall be a senator or member of Congress who shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. Now, you listen to me, particularly if you're progressive. Amy Totenberg, if you're listening, let me educate you about the Constitution you're sworn to uphold. That particular phrase, aid or comfort to the enemies thereof, you need actual declared enemies. The Confederates were actual declared enemies. The people who stormed the Capitol were American citizens. They were not enemies thereof. In fact, none of them have been charged with insurrection or treason. None of them have gone to war against the United States. This section clearly does not apply unless you take a willful progressive point of view on it. Marjorie Taylor Greene did not engage in insurrection or rebellion against the United States. You can dislike Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I do, but you cannot justify removing her from Congress under this provision of the Constitution, the history of which and the language of which clearly shows it was only meant to apply to the Confederates after the Civil War. And if it were to apply to what happened to Congress on January 6th, would have to have those individuals convicted of treason before you could apply it. None of them are even charged with treason, let alone insurrection against the United States. This section does not apply. And if you are a progressive who thinks this is a good thing, you have no basis whatsoever to say anything about anything conservatives do in the future, because you are willfully reading your hatred into the Constitution. If you think this is justified because you don't like Marjorie Taylor Greene, you are reading your hatred into the Constitution, and the Constitution doesn't give a damn about your emotions. I don't like Marjorie Taylor Greene. There is a person who is running against her in the primary named Jennifer Strahan. If I lived in that district, I would vote for her. She is as right-wing as Marjorie Taylor Greene, but she's not a nut job. Marjorie Taylor Greene should be defeated at the ballot. This doesn't do it. And I just find it notable. I find it actually very important that you note that all of the progressives and all of the reporters who are smearing the judge yesterday as just being a Trump acolyte doing what conservatives would do for Trump refuse to say the same thing about Amy Totenberg, who's trying to exclude this. By the way, there have been a series of these cases. Almost all of them have been thrown out by federal judges. This is one of the unique ones. If there's a path forward to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals as quickly as possible, Marjorie Taylor Greene should take it. And if you are a progressive, again, you may think this is a good thing, but if you do, you are doing more damage to the Constitution of the United States than the people who went into the Capitol on January 6th. If you justify what this judge is doing, You are no better than the people who stormed the Capitol, and a good bit worse, because you're actually trying to block a legitimate, lawful member of Congress from running for re-election just because you don't like her.